I try to imagine a fellow smarter than myself, and then I try to think, what would he do?
Charge up your axons, ready your receptors, and shift your lobes into upper beta phase. You are listening to Smart Drug Smarts, the podcast dedicated to helping you optimize your brain with the latest breakthroughs in neuroscience, nootropics, and psychopharmacology.
Hello and welcome to Smart Drug Smarts. I'm your host, Jesse Lawler, excited as always to bring you the latest and greatest in the battle for the betterment of your own brain, by any and all means necessary. If you stick around until the end of this 7th episode, I'm going to tell you the first term coined by Smart Drug Smarts listeners, which is very appropriate to our little subculture. I think it's pretty awesome, and I've started using it myself, and maybe you'll want to also. Our guest this week is Dr. Cory Reddish. Dr. Cory Reddish is a naturopathic doctor and a little bit of a local legend in the Burning Man community of the San Francisco Bay Area. That's where she hails from, and what she makes is a series of nutritional products that are for people who like to party very hard, do a lot of drinking and or recreational drug use, but don't want to wreck their brains afterwards and be hungover for days. And so what she makes is some nutritional supplements built around helping your brain recover as quickly as possible and sort of reestablish its own chemical equilibrium after you've basically been bad for the weekend. So anyway, very interesting interview. Got a lot of stuff that's actually quite relevant to brain health in general, and we'll be talking to her soon. But first, This Week in Neuroscience.
Smart Drug Smarts. This Week in Neuroscience.
Okay, so some officially crummy news for those of us that live in the United States and like to drink water. And who doesn't like to drink water? You can't live a day or two without water. It's one of the most vital things we have. So what's so crummy about water? Well, in the U.S., we are still adding a fluoride to our water supply. Why do we do this? Fluoride, it's a known neurotoxin, and the EPA says that fluoride is a chemical with substantial evidence of developmental neurotoxicity. More on that in a second. So we put fluoride in the water supply because fluoride is helpful for the development of tooth enamel in children between the ages of around 5 to 12. So what we're doing is we're putting in this, we'll call it a medicine for lack of a better term, this medicine for tooth development into the general water supply, even though the vast majority of water that flows through the pipes is never ever drank by a human being. Most of it is flushed down a toilet or used to do dishes or goes down a shower drain or waters the lawn or something other than being drank by a human being. And then of the amount that is drank by a human being, most human beings are not between the ages of 5 and 12 and in this whole tooth enamel development period of life. So it's really, really just stupid on the face of it. It would be like putting Prozac in the water supply to help the percent of the population that's depressed, or putting nitroglycerin into the water supply to help the small percent of the population that is an old person that has a heart condition that could benefit from nitroglycerin. It's just silly. Now, to make matters worse, the exact target demographic that's supposedly benefiting from the fluoride, these young children, also have developing brains, and it's now been said by Harvard that fluoride is definitely a developmental neurotoxin, and what they found is that children in high fluoride areas had significantly lower IQ than those who lived in low fluoride areas. So, you've got the Sophie's choice of, would you rather have a kid with really strong teeth that can't think very well, or a kid that's thinking the way that they should be able to, but, might have some tooth problems later in life? I think anybody that would choose their kid's teeth over their kid's brain probably had way too much fluoride in their own water supply. I'm sure you agree. Anyway, that's that. If next time there's an anti-fluoride rally in your area, I highly suggest you pull out your torch and your pitchfork and you march on town hall and make a big stink about it, because there are some places in the U.S. that have already decided to whack fluoride out of the water supply. There's a lot of laws being proposed to spread this and to get it out of there, and it would be great if your town too could be one of them.
Smart Drug Smarts.
Thank you very, very much for joining us. I'm on with Dr. Cory Reddish, and basically I wanted to just sort of have as far-ranging a conversation as you'd like to about what you're doing with the party packs and what people can do to sort of help their brains rebound after they've ridden them a little harder than they normally do.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure to be here and talk about what I am up to in the world of helping our brains, specifically in relation to, as you mentioned, sort of overindulging in partying, or not even necessarily overindulging, but what is the impact of particular recreational substances that many people enjoy on our bodies and on our brains. So everything from alcohol to psychoactive substances and things that people do. And there's a lot of people who are starting to become more conscious of this. If I am going to indulge, are there things that I can do to help me feel better the next day and minimize any harm or impact that these substances might have on the body?
Yeah. I was thinking about it, and it kind of reminded me a lot of how in schools there's the trying to promote abstinence among teens, and that's kind of like the official line in the sand. But kind of everybody knows realistically, it's like not all teens are going to abstain from sex, so it's probably a good idea to teach them about condoms and diseases and stuff like that too. And it's kind of the same with recreational drugs. It's like you can tell people till you're blue in the face, don't do this stuff, it's bad for you, but there's going to be a certain demographic that's too curious and whatever that's going to go in that direction. So for the people that are going to go in that direction, how can they still be as safe as possible about it?
That's a really good point. I kind of like that parallel, because when you just say don't do it, there's definitely a certain category of people that are going to say, well, then I'm going to do it.
Right. Yeah. Just to spite you, if nothing else.
Yeah. And, there's a whole spectrum within this context. There's people who maybe only drink a glass of wine or two a week, but even then, maybe they can't really do that anymore because they feel terrible even from one glass of wine. So what's really going on in the body there and in the brain? And then there's people who are more conscientious, more health focused, or consciously choosing to engage in certain substances and want to know, how can I protect myself in this and what's really happening in my body?
Yeah.
So it's been an interesting process for me developing these products that I make and doing the research. And there's more and more information coming out there on this topic. So I think it's really relevant and timely.
Totally agree. Can you tell us a little about, you are a medical doctor, the full-on MD following your name and stuff. Can you tell us a little about your medical background?
Yeah, I'm actually a naturopathic doctor, so a licensed naturopathic doctor. And
so it's an ND, not an MD. I apologize.
So licensed naturopathic doctors, we go to 4-year postgraduate medical schools. We learn all the basic sciences, clinical and physical diagnosis, biochemistry, physiology, pharmacology, diagnostic imaging, laboratory sciences, all that stuff. And then on top of that, all the therapeutics we learn are natural and non-toxic primarily. So we have several years of nutrition, herbal medicine, homeopathy, physical medicine, hydrotherapy. A lot of people will study Chinese medicine, Ayurveda. We're kind of a bridge between the two worlds, integrating conventional medicine and natural medicine. So the formulas I made are really based on looking at nutritional biochemistry and physiology, like what is actually happening in the body when you drink alcohol or you take a psychoactive substance like mushrooms or ecstasy or LSD, and how can we bring the body back into balance after that?
Right. So if you could go into a little detail about that, what really is going on in the body, and is the body's response sort of the same, across that spectrum of the substances you just talked about? I think you just named 4 off the top of your head. Is it the same sorts of effects in each case, or is it really very chemical dependent what gets depleted?
Well, there's definitely some crossover, but there's some differences as well. And some of the substances, it's, nuts and bolts biochemistry and physiology. And then as with everything in the brain, there's also an element of sort of the magical realm.
Right.
Sure what happens there, and it's like a rabbit hole. We're discovering more and more about it. Specifically with alcohol, what you're looking at, alcohol essentially can impact our neurotransmitters. So it's a central nervous system depressant. So it kind of calms and depresses the nervous system, relaxes the nervous system in some regard, but it can also deplete the neurotransmitter serotonin. So maybe I should I want to just say a couple things about the main neurotransmitters I'm going to be talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be a great sort of groundwork for people.
So we have both excitatory neurotransmitters in our system, so things that give us energy, rev us up, and then there's neurotransmitters that calm us down. And the two main ones we're dealing with here are serotonin and dopamine. So serotonin is, a lot of people have heard of it because of SSRIs, which are the serotonin reuptake inhibitor drugs like Prozac. that are used in the realm of depression. So serotonin is like our internal sunshine molecule.
Mm-hmm.
And it improves our mood. It is responsible for helping curb cravings. And it just, it regulates mood, appetite, sleep, and it makes us feel good. Dopamine is an excitatory neurotransmitter, and it really helps with cognition and focus, motivation, reward. So alcohol basically will stimulate serotonin in the short term, and it will also calm the system down. But one of the issues with it is it acts as a toxin in our body, and we have to then detoxify the substance out of our body. And that's the main job of the liver, or one of the main roles of the liver, is to detoxify everything out of our body. And what's important to know about that is the detoxification process it's usually a 2-phase process. So a toxin comes into the liver and it starts to be converted into a form that can then be eliminated from the body. But there's 2 phases. And usually the intermediary that gets formed after the first phase can be more toxic than the initial substance.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that's a key point number 1. A key point number 2 is that you need very specific vitamins, minerals, and amino acid cofactors for those systems, those detox systems to run. All right.
Yeah.
In the detox process of alcohol, you get an intermediary formed called acetaldehyde. So acetaldehyde is very toxic and it can cause tissue damage. And this is one of the main causes of a hangover, the inflammation and the symptoms of toxicity that are caused from acetaldehyde production.
So it's the secondary chemical, not the initial alcohol, that's making you feel crummy.
Essentially, yes. One of the main things. The other thing that happens with alcohol is it can deplete B vitamins and electrolytes, and it can imbalance your blood sugar. So those are all things that are looking at targeting when you want to minimize hangover symptoms. But those people I mentioned who say, come to me and they're like, Dr. Cory, I can't even drink a glass of wine anymore because I feel like I got run over by a truck the next day. Those people usually have some sort of breakdown in their detox process, in their acetaldehyde metabolism. Mm-hmm. That can either be a result of depletion of the nutrients. Some people are called pathological detoxifiers. And what that means is they just don't have, their enzyme systems just aren't running well. So they're not detoxifying properly. And then it can also be genetic. So people with indigenous heritage, East Asian heritage often have a deficiency in the enzymes that eliminate alcohol dehydrogenase from the system. That's why sometimes they tend to get more intoxicated more easily or red in the face. It's kind of technical, but I think it's pretty interesting.
No, I think that is pretty interesting.
And another thing I wanted to mention was there was a study that came out of Rutgers a few months ago that talked about the impact of alcohol on the brain, and really starting to look into this because for a while, the party line was we were hearing a lot of moderate alcohol consumption can actually be beneficial for your health. As naturopaths, we were always like,
Oh, yeah. So this Rutgers study, was this the one where, if I remember right, the study was saying that even a modest amount of alcohol use can inhibit brain cell growth?
Right. Well, what they were saying is there's kind of a fine, like what exactly is moderate alcohol use? And there's sort of a fine line between moderate alcohol use and what they were calling binge drinking, which is, actually quite common. It's people who maybe have a few glasses, a few drinks during the week, and then on the weekend they go a little harder. Mm-hmm. And that, according to their study, was more binge drinking behavior. And yes, it could affect brain cell growth and brain development. And we definitely know that alcohol has an impact on the nervous system and brain development, say in fetuses and embryos.
Yeah.
And it's kind of translating into adults as well. And so looking at it as like, maybe we need to rethink this recommendation. I think a lot of that recommendation was based on the fact that certain types of alcohol can have nutrient or antioxidant properties like resveratrol in red wine, but that alcohol itself maybe isn't so great for us. And I think that part of it is this acetaldehyde or the toxins that are generated from alcohol consumption.
You're the doctor and I'm not, but my take on sort of the alcohol recommendations has always been that a lot of it was based on just the fact that it thins the blood a little, which is potentially good for your heart if you're overweight and your blood isn't what it should be for other reasons. But if your diet is generally pretty good and you're pretty healthy, the so-called benefits of alcohol are kind of non-existent.
Yeah, I would concur with that. So in looking at harm reduction from alcohol and preventing the damage caused by it, you want to look at facilitating the detoxification of alcohol from the body, preventing any further tissue damage and inflammation, and also replenishing those neurotransmitters and replenishing the nutrients and vitamins and minerals that get depleted in the process. So when you do that, you wake up the next day feeling a lot better.
Cool. And can you talk about, I guess, some of the other substances that are in the spectrum of things that you have, products to help people recover from, and some of the differences? Because obviously, there's probably a lot of differences between, alcohol and psilocybin mushrooms or something like that.
Sure. Well, just to name the products, so I essentially formulated 2 different products. And a little bit of the history of why I even started doing this was I went to a big festival out in the desert that is called Burning Man. Many people have heard of it. It was back in 2003, and they have a gift economy there. So I decided that I knew there was a lot of people partying out there and being pretty wild. So I started researching the impact that substances have on the body and also looking at various nutrients that might be able to help rebalance the system. And I started hand concocting these formulas in my pharmacy that I had. I had like a 1/4 pound of magnesium and a 1/2 pound of B12. And I was hand mixing them and putting them into a Cap'em Quick, which is this like old fashioned encapsulator.
Right.
And just was handing out these nutrients and vitamins out in the desert. And I was with a lot of people who just really weren't very health conscious and didn't take care of themselves very well. And people started coming back for more and asking me for more because they found that they felt so much better and they were able to get back to work and recover and have more energy and focus. And so eventually I started getting them manufactured and packaged. And there are 2 different ones. There's the booze pack and the extreme pack. So the booze pack is the one that's really formulated for alcohol recovery and detoxification. It's got various substances in there that help the liver detoxify the alcohol. So amino acids like N-acetylcysteine, glycine, and then you've got a whole spectrum of B vitamins. Thiamine often gets depleted with alcohol, B12, vitamin C. And there's also some good antioxidants and anti-inflammatory ingredients in there, like turmeric, green tea, grapeseed extract, and some substances that help to balance blood sugar and actually can help decrease some of the cravings for alcohol. So that's the booze pack. The other thing that I just want to mention that's really great for post-alcohol consumption is coconut water. And that's because coconut water has a great electrolyte profile, and replenishing your electrolytes can really help you feel a lot better when you're drinking alcohol. So doing that before you go to bed, along with a booze pack, is a great combination. So the extreme pack was formulated as more targeted towards what I'll put in quotations as extreme substances. So this is what we're talking about: MDMA, psychedelics, cocaine, things that people are doing and that do deplete the neurotransmitters pretty significantly. Actually, a lot of the effect of the substance comes from the big release of neurotransmitters. So especially something like MDMA, which is also called ecstasy, part of the euphoria and the pleasure comes from the big release of serotonin. There's also often a methamphetamine component to it. So that's the stimulant, and also an element of cocaine where it's speedy. It's a big stimulant. And so not only are you getting more of a adrenaline, which is also called epinephrine release, but it's also stimulating dopamine. So dopamine, again, is that neurotransmitter that makes us feel energized and sharp and focused and motivated. And it can also cause some clenching and jaw tension, muscle tension. And that's something that a lot of people experience on those substances. They'll end up, really clenching their jaws, or some people will grind their teeth. And a lot of that is secondary to the dopamine release.
Just a quick aside question. I realize this is sort of a distraction, but why is it that would affect the jaw in particular versus other muscle groups in the body?
Yeah, that's a good question. It does also affect the eyes. So a lot of people experience kind of a fluttering of the eyes. And I just think the jaw is one of the more common places. And I don't know if I have a real clear-cut answer for that.
Okay, yeah, no worries. I just figured if you knew, then
yeah,
people might be curious because, I've heard about the jaw thing, but I was always kind of like, I wonder what it is about the jaw.
Well, it also affects the other muscles as well in the body, because people find they have a lot more energy, or they want to they take these at raves, or when they're they're dancing and they're moving a lot. So it can stimulate all kinds of movement as well. And maybe we don't necessarily have as much movement in the jaw. And I don't know, I'm hypothesizing here. But it can affect the jaw. So in the extreme pack, what you're looking at is replenishing serotonin and dopamine stores, and also using various nutrients to help relax the muscles or replenish the muscles, and to a certain degree detoxify as well. But what you see often with substances like ecstasy and to a certain degree psychedelics and cocaine is that there's kind of this downswing in mood that happens a day or two after. There's the euphoria, and then there's a drop in the mood because the serotonin levels dip. And a lot of people have low serotonin levels anyway these days because of stress, because of environmental conditions, lack of sunlight, these sorts of things. So for many people, it's hard to replenish the serotonin properly. So you need to, help that system out. And so there's things like, a lot of people will know of 5-hydroxytryptophan or 5-HTP as being something that can help boost serotonin levels. But I kind of call this beyond 5-HTP, because what a lot of people don't realize is that you need certain cofactors for the 5-HTP to then be converted into serotonin. So 5-HTP is a more active form of tryptophan, and you need methylated B6, B12, and also vitamin C for that to happen. Tyrosine is the main amino acid that helps to replenish dopamine. So that's in the formula as well. And then it's actually pretty simple in terms of helping relax the muscles. It's just calcium and magnesium and B5 to help relax the jaw and relax the muscles and muscle tension. Other things that can be really helpful are rhodiola, taurine as well. I think I mentioned B6. So I kind of see these as, in some ways when these substances, when these neurotransmitters get depleted, that's when, if people are drinking or taking psychoactive substances, that's when you start seeing people needing more of the substance to get the same effect, because the neurotransmitters are depleted.
Right.
And that's when you start seeing addiction kick in, and people needing more and more in order to feel the same effect, or even to feel normal again.
Yeah, I guess the cocktail that you described of different like remedial substances to help sort of boost people back. Do you feel like 5 years from now, is there going to be, are you going to have products for each one of these substances that's kind of a little bit more tailored? I assume that there's probably a lot of difference between maybe somebody doing LSD and somebody doing cocaine. Subjectively, they're very different experiences for the person doing them. So I'm assuming that there might be different things going on in the brain.
Right. Well, you have more of an amphetamine stimulating process going on with the cocaine. So you're getting a lot more dopamine depletion and also the adrenaline. There is some dopamine going on with the LSD. I mean, the thing with the LSD is I don't think it's really clear. I don't think we really know exactly what's going on. So I have ideas for other packs, certainly, lots of other packs. For now, those categories are put together because I find that they do help across the board. And it's also a matter of, kind of market are we looking at?
Sure. There's obviously a lot more drinkers out there than there are LSD users.
Kind of edgy territory.
Oh, yeah, for sure. You're definitely going in the fringe section of the website.
What? The fringe?
Yeah, we've got the little categories of what different podcast episodes are going in. This one I think is landing squarely in fringe.
Fringe / nutrition.
Absolutely. I'm kind of teasing.
At the same time, there's 25 million people using ecstasy. Significant.
Yeah, that is significant. Is that worldwide?
Worldwide.
Yeah.
And I remember being in Australia and a pill, which is what they call ecstasy, was about the same price as 2 beers. So for kids going out partying,
yeah,
for them, they get a much longer high for a pill than having 2 beers. And some of them were having 6 pills a night.
Unbelievable.
So it's pretty intense. And I've sat with the ethics of this to a certain degree, making a product that helps people recover from substances that aren't necessarily legal. But I see it as more of a gateway. And I've seen this with, say, Burning Man, because I started handing them out and then I started selling a few of them. And now it's on people's list of essential things to have for Burning Man because they really want to take care of their bodies and they see the impact that it has on them and that they're recovering and not necessarily going down this hole of using more and more of the substances. And they're also thinking like, wow, these vitamins actually really help me. Who's Dr. Cory and what else does she have to offer? Okay, well now maybe I'll take a look at my diet. Well now maybe I'll look at something else. And so it's kind of I call it like a positive gateway drug, the party packs, in terms of getting onto a healthier path. Like here's my contribution that I can make to this problem.
I think that's a totally legitimate thing you just said, because I think for a lot of people, they haven't even really clued into the fact that different foods and supplements that they can eat can have an effect on their neurology other than a bad one. And just getting turned on to the fact that there are some things that will help you qualitatively feel better, feel mentally sharper. Turning that light switch on for people, I think, can be a powerful thing.
Right. And people are going to do these things anyway. It's not about saying you should or you shouldn't, but I'm about saying if you do this too.
Yeah.
Protect your body, minimize the harm.
It's like even Evel Knievel wore a helmet.
Right.
So let's see, one question that I had was putting aside legality altogether and just thinking only from like a neurological perspective. As far as we know right now, I realize that there probably isn't a clear answer to this. What recreational drugs should people just never, ever, ever take, in your opinion, and versus those that might sort of be an acceptable risk if you really, really need to party?
That question is a little challenging for me to answer.
If you don't feel comfortable with that one, we'll just cut it out. No worries. I've thought if you sort of had sort of a sliding scale of what people could maybe get away with, it would be an interesting answer, but I can understand if you don't feel comfortable with that one.
I mean, I think there's pluses and minuses. And I don't even want to say pros and cons or pluses and minuses. A lot of people will claim that, physiologically, LSD doesn't have a huge impact on the body. However, we know that people can have schizophrenic episodes from taking LSD. And then there's also, LSD and some psychedelics, and ecstasy was actually being used in psychotherapy, and people are getting significantly positive results using that in that container with the therapist as a healing modality. And in shamanic traditions, ayahuasca, like many of these psychoactive plants are derived from plants, and there's also some derived from animals that alter our brain chemistry and dimensional reality, however you want to look at it, can be deeply therapeutic.
I remember one thing that was really interesting that I read is that the guy who is the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, this was like, I think back in the 40s or 50s, but the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous said that LSD was the most powerful tool for treating alcohol addiction of anything he'd ever come across. This was back before LSD was made illegal, like in the early 60s, but he was just an absolute LSD proponent for breaking other addictions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen ayahuasca work that way. And I've also seen there's a substance called iboga or ibogaine that's used in heroin addiction very successfully. And so I can't really throw the baby out with the bathwater in this department. So I think that there's no clear answer to that. It's really on an individualized basis. It's on, are you doing this as just purely like, woohoo, hey, let's go party? Is there an addiction component with it? Are you doing it in a more conscious, sacred way in order to connect deeper with yourself spiritually? There's all these different things. There's a website, dancesafe.org, and I think they have very good neutral information about all the different substances. They also get into, ketamine, and there's a lot of other more designer drugs that are out there and coming out. And I think they do a really good job of kind of giving the really neutral breakdown of here's the substance, here's what it does in the body, here's what you need to potentially be concerned about.
That is a great bevy of information. I think you're providing a really, really valuable service to people. Is there anything that you'd like to circle back to and talk a little more about, or a little other?
Well, I think one of the things that I just wanted to mention about the packs and these products is that, these are things that you could take every day to help you feel better. These formulated for these specific niches, but they also, everybody could use a little liver detox support help. A lot of times, most people need a little neurotransmitter brain support help. Like I said, it's not just for these extreme situations, but when you're traveling or you're going to weddings or extended periods of time where you're maybe not eating and you're drinking more and you're not eating your regular diet or you're not sleeping regularly and traveling. So I just think the information that you guys are providing on the podcast in terms of ways that people can support their brain health and support their body in a natural way is really important. Our environment is rapidly changing, and we have a lot more toxicity and chemicals in our environment. And we're really starting to learn now how these toxins impact our body. And we're seeing these illnesses like autism, chronic autoimmune diseases, and really high rates of cancer. And so you just have to really start asking yourself, what else can I be doing to protect myself? And this is a huge topic, and there's so many different things that we could talk about. But I think that, being proactive in this regard is really important.
Smart Drug Smarts, the podcast so smart, we have smart in our title twice.
Okay, so a pretty interesting interview there. As the Beastie Boys like to say, you got to fight for your right to party, and luckily Dr. Cory is there to help you if you need to fight your way back from having partied a little too hard. As promised in our Ruthless Listener Retention Gimmick,
Smart Drug Smarts, Ruthless Listener Retention Gimmick.
The first term ever coined by a listener of our podcast having to do with smart drugs. So I was hanging out with my buddy Steve the other day. Steve is a smart drugs user. And anyway, I was thinking about taking 100 milligrams of modafinil. I had a lot of stuff to get done. I wanted to make sure that I was going to be bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and alert and mentally springy for a several-hour jaunt into the future. It was already getting a little bit late. So I was kind of hemming and hawing whether I should really take it or not. And Steve, like every problem drinker, has some fellow drunk that tells him, oh yeah, have another shot. And anyway, Steve was very much in favor of my taking the modafinil, and in fact called himself a modafinabler. And I started just laughing my ass. I love that term. And so I've been using the term modafinabler. And then when one takes modafinil, then one has been modafinabled. So anyway, you're encouraged to spread these terms out and start using them. I've been using it all the time. I think it's probably funnier than it really is to anybody else, but I liked it. Anyway, so that is all. That is the episode. If you liked what you heard, please recommend this podcast to your friends and your enemies and anybody else. The show notes for this episode will be online at www.smartdrugsmarts.com, including the links to anything that we mentioned here. I'll be back next week, same time, same podcast, and the same unflagging commitment to helping you fine-tune the performance of your own brain. Have a great week and talk to you soon. Bye.
You've been listening to the Smart Drug Smarts podcast. Visit us online at www.smartdrugsmarts.com and subscribe to our mailing list to keep your neurons buzzing with the latest in brain optimization.